Have you ever canceled plans and felt relieved? Not sick, not antisocial, just relieved. The moment the message pops up, hey, can we reschedule? And instead of disappointment, you feel your shoulders drop, your breathing slow, your brain whisper, thank you. And then maybe 5 seconds later comes the guilt. You start wondering what's wrong with you. Why don't you crave constant company? Why does a quiet evening alone feel better than a crowded dinner table? Are you becoming distant? Are you missing out? Or is there something deeper going on? Let me show you something important. Preferring solitude is not the same thing as being lonely, and it's definitely not the same thing as being broken. We live in a world that subtly worships extroversion. From open office spaces to networking events, from put yourself out there advice to social media feeds packed with parties and group photos, we're constantly told that connection equals visibility, and visibility equals value. So if you're someone who genuinely enjoys your own company, it can feel like you're swimming upstream. But psychologically speaking, people who prefer solitude often have something very specific happening inside their brains. Let's start with the basics. You've probably heard of introversion and extroversion, concepts popularized by Carl Jung. But here's what often gets misunderstood. Introversion isn't about shyness, it's about stimulation. Your brain has a certain ideal level of stimulation. Extroverts typically need more external input, conversation, movement, social interaction to feel energized. Introverts, on the other hand, already have a more active baseline in certain brain regions. Studies have shown differences in how dopamine pathways respond to social reward. For some people, loud environments and constant interaction don't feel energizing. They feel overwhelming. It's like having a phone that's already at 80% brightness. If someone cranks it up to 100%, your eyes start to hurt. Solitude is simply you turning the brightness down. And if you prefer solitude, your nervous system might actually be thanking you for it. But here's where it gets more interesting. Preferring solitude isn't just about avoiding overstimulation. For many people, it's about depth. Think about how you process experiences. When something meaningful happens, do you immediately want to talk about it with 10 people, or do you want to sit with it first, turn it over in your mind, analyze it, feel it fully? There's a psychological concept called self-reflection, and people who enjoy solitude often score high on it. They're comfortable turning inward. They don't panic in silence. In fact, silence is where they meet themselves. And that can be powerful. Research on creativity repeatedly shows that breakthrough ideas often emerge in quiet moments, during a walk alone, in the shower, late at night when the world goes still. Solitude gives your brain access to something called the default mode network, the system that activates when you're not focused on the outside world. This network is deeply involved in imagination, autobiographical memory, and long-term planning. In other words, when you're alone and doing nothing, your brain is actually doing something profound. It's connecting dots. Have you ever noticed that after spending time alone, you sometimes come back sharper, clearer, more decisive? That's not coincidence. That's cognitive integration happening. Now, of course, there's a difference between chosen solitude and forced isolation. Loneliness hurts. Humans are wired for connection. Studies from places like Harvard University have consistently shown that strong relationships are one of the biggest predictors of long-term well-being. We're social creatures. But here's the key distinction. People who prefer solitude still value connection. They just value intentional connection. They'd rather have one deep conversation than 10 shallow ones. They'd rather sit quietly with someone who understands them than shout over music in a crowded room. It's not about rejecting people, it's about filtering noise. And sometimes it's about emotional safety. Let's talk about that for a moment. If you grew up being the observer, the one who watched more than you spoke, you may have developed a rich inner world. Maybe you learned early on that your thoughts were safest when kept private. Or maybe you simply realized that you could process emotions more effectively alone. For some people, solitude becomes a reset button. Social interaction requires performance, even small amounts. You adjust your tone, your facial expressions, your energy. It's subtle, but it's work. When you're alone, that performance drops. You don't have to be on. You can exist without editing yourself. That's deeply restorative. There's also something quietly courageous about enjoying your own company. Many people fear being alone because being alone means confronting yourself. No distractions, no background noise, just you and your thoughts. And that can be uncomfortable. But if you prefer solitude, chances are you've developed a certain tolerance, maybe even appreciation for that inner dialogue. You're not running from yourself, you're sitting with yourself. And in a culture addicted to distraction, that's rare. Of course, preferring solitude can come with misunderstandings. People might label you as aloof, distant, hard to read. They might assume you're judging them, when in reality, you're just conserving energy, or thinking, or enjoying the quiet. This misunderstanding can create pressure. You might push yourself to be more social than feels natural. You might say yes when your body is screaming no. And over time, that disconnect between your inner rhythm and your outer behavior can create exhaustion. So here's a question worth asking yourself. When you spend time alone, do you feel nourished or depleted? If you feel nourished, that's not avoidance, that's alignment. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, yes, the flow state guy, found that people often experience their deepest focus and satisfaction when working alone on meaningful tasks. Solitude can create the conditions for flow. No interruptions, no social comparison, just immersion. And speaking of comparison, let's address something subtle but important. Social environments constantly invite comparison. Who's more successful, funnier, more attractive, more connected? Your brain can't help but scan for hierarchy. It's evolutionary. But constant comparison is draining. It pulls you outward. Solitude removes the scoreboard. When you're alone, there's no audience, no ranking, just your own pace, your own standards, your own curiosity. And that can strengthen your sense of identity. People who are comfortable alone often develop a strong internal compass. They make decisions based less on social pressure and more on personal values. That doesn't mean they don't care what others think. It just means they're not ruled by it. And here's something beautiful. Enjoying solitude can actually improve your relationships. It sounds paradoxical, right? But think about it. If you're not using other people to escape your own thoughts, then when you choose to be with someone, you're choosing them intentionally. You're there because you want connection, not because you fear emptiness. That kind of presence feels different. It feels grounded. Now, let's gently acknowledge the shadow side. Sometimes preferring solitude can slide into avoidance. If you've been hurt, betrayed, or misunderstood, being alone can feel safer than risking vulnerability again. And that's human. The question isn't whether you enjoy solitude. The question is whether solitude is expanding your life or shrinking it. Are you using it to recharge so you can show up more authentically, or are you using it to hide from potential rejection? Only you can answer that. And answering honestly requires the same self-reflection that probably makes you enjoy solitude in the first place. Here's something else worth considering. In many philosophical traditions, solitude is not just accepted, it's revered. Think of monks meditating in quiet monasteries, writers retreating to cabins, thinkers walking alone for hours. History is full of people who stepped away from the crowd to hear their own thoughts more clearly. Even today, leaders and creatives often schedule deliberate alone time, not because they hate people, but because insight needs space. Your brain needs white space the way a painting needs negative space. Without it, everything blurs. So if you're someone who prefers a quiet Friday night with a book over a loud party, maybe that's not a deficiency. Maybe that's discernment. If you feel recharged after a long walk alone, maybe that's not antisocial. Maybe that's self-regulation. You are not obligated to match someone else's social appetite. At the same time, remember that solitude is most powerful when it's a choice, not a cage.
It should feel like opening a door inward, not locking the world out. And maybe the most important thing to understand is this: preferring solitude doesn't mean you love people less. It might just mean you love depth more. You value conversations that stretch, silence that's shared without awkwardness, moments that feel real instead of performative. So the next time you feel that quiet relief when plans get canceled, don't rush to shame yourself. Ask instead, what does my nervous system need right now? And if the answer is space, trust that. Because in a world that constantly tells you to be louder, faster, more visible, choosing solitude can be an act of self-knowledge, and self-knowledge is powerful. If this resonated with you, I'd love to know, do you feel energized by time alone, or do you struggle with the guilt that sometimes comes with it?